Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate you taking the time. Um, so, what are we doing here, right? Because we wrote this big guide on data leaders and AI and how to think about context engineering and orders. And you were a huge part of helping make that a reality because you do this every day and you live the life, you live the dream. And while the guide's big, there's even more that we wanted to talk about because there's so much nuance here. Like it's data. I mean, nothing is rarely straightforward. So, wanted to give you the chance to kind of dive into a few of these out topics. But first, tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do at Hex? Why are you interested in this?
Yeah.
What should the listeners know?
Yeah, sure. I'm Katie. I've broadly been in the data space for over a decade. I've done most types of data work at lots of different company sizes at this point, all the way from 7-person company up to 8,000 publicly traded company. Um, I recently came to Hex as the head of data, came from a customer company. So I'm coming in quite familiar with the product and loving the product a lot and trying to figure out how data works at Hex and how context engineering in particular should work with our product.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think that's where I wanted to start because when we say a guide to AI, I think really what we're saying without saying it is like context engineering is the way to get AI to work. I mean, what is kind of your thought on that? Like, how would you fit context engineering into the broader AI conversation?
Yeah, definitely. It's a really critical part of AI. I mean, AI has a lot of data baked into it from the training run, but there's also a lot of really specific information that it's not going to have that it would never have been in the public corpus of the internet that it was trained on. And there's going to be a lot of stuff about your specific company that is not represented in the data that the AI was trained on, which, as far as I can tell, is the perspective of the average Redditor. Um, so, context engineering is a great way to augment prompting, which is a skill that people are pretty familiar with all of the information that an agent would need to be able to speak to what's happening at your company. And the thing that's interesting about context engineering is that we've kind of always been doing it on data teams. A lot of it is similar to data engineering. There's some new aspects of it, but the more I learn about it and the more I think about context engineering, the more I realize it's a new way of scaling what data teams know about organizations and maybe moving something from a less ice or a place that was previously kind of isolated. Like tons of dashboards will have a random annotation where it'll be like, oh, on this date, there was a data error, so ignore this. Like that's stuff that you can give to an agent right now. And that scales so much better than a random annotation in your dashboard or someone on the data team having to remember it and be like, ah,
Remember, we
yeah,
had an outage for 2 hours, so like, don't
yeah,
freak out. Yeah. Well, and I had the same feeling when I was reading through all this months and months ago. Where I was kind of like, okay, this is just like maybe doing the documentation that we all knew was important, but humans are really bad at reading documentation all the time and like following
and
instructions
writing
and writing
documentation for that
documentation.
matter.
And so it's like now it kind of gives us a reason to like care about this because I like to make a joke that like agents don't have anything better to do. Like they don't have a softball club or pickleball that they have to go to. Like they just live in this little box that we've created for them.
Yeah, totally. And it gives new life to a lot of things that people have been saying are valuable for a long time, like metadata. It's always a hard thing to justify investing in as a data team, but it's really important. And now there's a really clear use case for it. So taking the time to do things right is very rewarded in this
Exactly.
agentic world.
Yeah. Respect the metadata.
Yeah.
Finally, give her moment in the sun. Give her her due. So in the guide that we talked about, it covers this like phased rollout approach and like we're almost required to like give you the best case scenario, but you and I both know that like rarely do things in data ever pan out exactly step 1, 2, 3 and we've arrived at like the magical conclusion. And so I can imagine as somebody in your shoes reading this on the page, knowing the fuzzy edges, like what were some of the things that you struggled giving feedback on? You were just like, oh, we could be do this or this or this. Like, tell me more about that because I'm curious to understand.
Yeah. I mean, the hard thing about giving generic advice to data teams is that the devil is in the detail with data work, and I do mean the devil. Uh,
The literal devil.
yes. um, like people are starting from such different places. Like a data team is not just one thing. They can be structured so differently. They can be using super different technologies. So giving someone like a zero state, this is where you start in every scenario is a really hard thing to do. I do think we struck a good balance of like, here are some quick things you can do. Here are the more heavyweight investments. And that makes it a little bit easier, but it's definitely something that it's like there's just so much that I would want to say about
Yeah.
like if you have a really messy warehouse, do it this way. If you're really clean, do it this way. And the other big thing is really just there's so much we don't know about how context engineering works yet. Software engineering people are starting to figure out how to help coding agents be more effective with context, but analytics is just a little bit different. Like there are a lot of bits of overlap, and a lot of the same workflows benefit practitioners of analytics, but it's not a one-to-one translation. If it were, we would just be software engineers.
Right.
So the specific things that work well for data teams and the types of things that we're trying to do, which in some cases can be really subjective. Like what is a good analysis? It's kind of hard to say, and you might not know until a lot later. Like
Yeah.
sometimes thoughts take a while to percolate and ferment in your head. That's another aspect of it being difficult to give generic advice to data teams about building their context up.
Yeah. And and I can imagine too, it's if you're starting from maybe one place and you're saying, hey, you have to go to this other place, that in the past has been an enormous effort on a lot of data teams because it's it's fixing the train while it's running down the tracks at 150 miles an hour. And do you feel like AI is a thing that's worthwhile to sort of slow the train down to make it go even faster? Or do you feel like data teams are still maybe like a bit stuck in that feeling of like we can't slow down, but we're being forced to change? Like what do you see happening there?
Yes to all of it.
Okay, cool.
I mean, like you never get the time that you want to do things perfectly as a data team. Like your business is always going to have lots of questions. Things change really fast. Data kind of is a mirror of your business.
Oh, I love that. It
Um,
is.
and like your business is probably messy. And as someone on the data team at a company, your job is to kind of put that into a format that's generically useful. Generic is my word today.
It is.
Uh,
Hashtag generic.
um, but it is worth trying to figure out how to make AI work for you. Something that is pretty remarkable to me at Hex, and we're not necessarily representative of what every data team is going to be like, but something that's remarkable is we don't really spend a lot of time as a data team answering people's ad hoc questions. The agent does most of that. And like we have lots of other things that we help people with directly. We still provide a lot of support to the organization, but the agent gives us so much headroom to think about what's the right way to do things. And I'm also somewhat surprised by how good it is. Um, and like we invest a lot of effort into the quality of our data, which makes it much better. But there are things that I would anticipate that the agent wouldn't be able to do that it does
And
very
you're
well.
like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm like pleasantly surprised.
good. Well, that's the best way to be surprised.
Yeah.
Rather
True.
than like a birthday party jumping out of
Yes.
behind a sofa or anything like
Yeah.
that. Nice. When I mean, you when we think about what somebody needs to kind of be successful here and to see some of the results that you're talking about, like what sort of frame of reference do you recommend them having? Like, should they have some working knowledge of some of the stuff you're talking about around context engineering? Should they be data experts? Should they like help somebody who's trying to think like, because I feel like there's a lot of fear or maybe hesitancy of like, ooh, I'm
Definitely.
not technical enough, or I'm not savvy enough, or I don't know enough about what goes under the covers of these models, which I think is sometimes a blessing and a curse with people who are in the data world. Cause like we need to know how it works in order to trust it a lot of the time, at least
Yeah.
is my feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And it's very relatable because the agent kind of becomes an extension of you. And if you don't feel like you have a lot of control over it, it can be kind of scary to just turn it loose. Um, but what I'll start by saying is the mental model of it being a junior analyst is really helpful. Um, it does things sometimes that it's like, yeah, I would give a junior analyst that I was managing feedback about this. It's not necessarily the way it should be doing that. And the types of mistakes it makes often are things that it's like, yeah, it kind of knows what it's doing, but maybe it needs some more specific information. So like that in and of itself, I think is a really helpful way to think about it. Where it's just like this is a good way to like stave off some basic like people coming at you with questions and setting expectations. Like it's going to be like a junior analyst. If this is something that you really want the right answer, you should talk to someone who's a bit more experienced. And people get that pretty readily, especially because that metaphor is used in other places. In terms of things to prepare yourself with as a data leader trying to roll this out, I do think it's worth reading a little bit about prompting. People have been doing that for a while, and there are actually some real best practices that are being established, and people are starting to figure out like these are good ways of doing this. Same with various things in the AI assisted coding world. So, a rules file is a thing we have in Hex. And a lot of coding environments, like Cursor has rules files, Claude Code has a rules file. Software engineers have figured out a number of things that work well for them. And it's worth going and reading about it just because it gives you some framework for how you should think about giving context to a machine and like what it can productively use. And then there are some data things that are really different. But as a data practitioner, like you're going to have a lot more sense of like my metadata is this, a semantic model is this, and you don't have to use all of those different things necessarily. But it's good to think about like what kind of information is in this, like what would this be used for by a person. A lot of times, that's really helpful for getting started and anticipating what the agent might do.
Like, what's the toolbox? What are the
Yeah.
tools in it, and how might I use them? And
Yeah,
I don't
and it's
always
it's
need
usually
it.
pretty intuitive.
Mhm.
Like there are some things that might surprise you, and I think probably, at least from my perspective, the thing that's been the most counterintuitive has been the rules file, which is
Yeah,
just it's text.
yeah,
LLMs are good at that, but there's still particular things about it that are good to know and some gotchas in terms of how it behaves.
yeah. Because it can be everything, and then it could be nothing,
Yeah,
and then it could be sort of a thing, and it's very intimidating. It's I
yeah.
mean, the blank canvas kind of like, what do I put on here?
Yeah, totally.
Um,
But and I also think it's like it's tempting in that you can write anything you want in
right.
there. So it's good to think about like, okay, what is this actually good for? Like what is covered by an existing technology or an existing part of our data tool chain?
Yeah. And how do we, because I think what I've learned is like when you cross the streams and like one thing sort of collides with the other, that's when it gets a little goofy. If
Yes.
they stay on their sort of like swim lanes, it behaves a lot more reasonably
Yeah,
and more predictably, I guess, is the most important
definitely.
thing.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I mean, we're talking about a lot of different technologies, but also existing technologies. Like in this guide, we're kind of saying, hey, this is what's important, but like, how does it change your workflow? Fundamentally, I guess, like, what does it feel like to start to work with these things as a data leader?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I feel like things are remarkably similar. My mental model has always been that dashboards are just the last stage of your data pipeline. And I think that is true with agents as well.
Okay.
They're really sort of a different mechanism for distribution of your work as a data team. And the main thing that's different is thinking about the ways in which what you have produced are going to be used unsupervised.
Hmm.
So if you have confusing column names, in the past, if it's mostly your data team using them or some SQL savvy person and your other company, like they'll probably be able to figure it out. But the agent won't tell you necessarily
Yeah.
that it confused two things or it might not be obvious. So like a lot more of what I think about at this point is consistency and trying to just assume that this is going to be used by someone or something that isn't going to ask me questions about it.
They're just going to
It's just going to
assume the
do it.
answer.
And
And yeah,
the more you can make things simple, it helps the people who use the data, but it really helps the agent. And the agent is the thing that is kind of omnipresent, never gets tired, and gives you a lot of leverage in distributing the work of your data team. Because your data team is probably already doing a lot of really good work.
yeah,
And the nice thing is to have someone who never gets tired of going and telling people about it.
yeah. Or referencing it in their answer,
Yeah.
which I think is my favorite thing about at least what Hex is building. It's not just about, hey, your data warehouse is clean, but also, hey, all this other great stuff that your team has made can probably help you answer that. Like you should check there first before going and building something net new.
Yeah.
Which I think is the thing we're always chasing. It feels like where another question comes up, but that question isn't necessarily indicative of a new dashboard that needs to be created. But referencing the past work of your team is challenging because you're doing so much all the time.
Yeah. It's
Like,
hard to keep track of it
yeah,
as the person who did it.
your
Not just
your
someone who's doing a
discography is
completely different job.
yeah, it's you've got 12 albums at this point, and it's hard to remember what
Yeah.
track 5 of album 2 was.
Yeah.
So you can reference it later.
And maybe another way in which things have changed is I think more people are asking questions when they
Yeah,
can ask an agent because there are definitely things that people don't feel comfortable asking a person because it would be admitting that they don't know something that they feel like they should know.
yeah,
So more people participate, more people who maybe wouldn't have been supported just due to a lack of bandwidth are participating, and you get a broader sense of what people care about from a data perspective. And something else that's very interesting to me as a data leader is I have more data on what people are using my data for.
love it. I love data
Um,
about data.
yeah, I mean,
It's
I
my
don't know. It's something I always want.
it's
Like,
my
you spend all
favorite.
this time looking at what people do with your product, how they interact with your marketing, and you don't have that same information about how people use what you built as a data team. So it's really cool to finally have that.
That is cool. And that's how you get better. I mean, because
Yeah.
you don't. y- I love what you said about like it makes people ask more questions because I agree. I think that psychological safety of like admitting I don't know something is for whatever reason like something that people have trouble. Even though there's a literal team designed to help
Yeah.
them with that very thing, there's still like some barrier of like, hey, can you help me? Like, I know I should know this, or maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. But like, I always joked like when I was on data teams, I was kind of like a priest, but then also like an analyst because
Totally.
they needed to like imbue onto
I
me.
do I have felt like the executive team's confession box
Exactly.
before.
Like, don't worry, it won't ever leave. Like, you can be as honest with me as you want because it's just going to help me make the thing that you want be more crystallized and be more clear. If you try and like tiptoe around what you're really getting at, like you're going to get a half baked thing that's not really going to do what you want it to do.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I guess to close out context engineering and kind of like the work behind the work to make the thing work, right? Sorry, that was really lame. You don't have to use that. Um, what do teams get wrong when they start this? Is it biting off more than they can chew? Is it looking in the wrong place? Like, what have you kind of seen, or maybe what's some experience that you've had going in the wrong direction?
Yeah. I mean, definitely bite off more than you can chew is a data team thing. We're people who love details. We're kind of perfectionists. And that's something I think people need to kind of shove out of their mind is like, it's not going to be perfect. You should probably try to roll it out before you feel ready because like I don't know, like what's the worst that can happen? Like a lot of times the questions people have are actually not that significant. And like that's something you kind of know as well, where a lot of people will come to you with their quick question and it's like, we're not gonna prioritize that. It's not important. And it's
Yeah,
like that gets answered. And like maybe people get a subtly wrong answer or like it's just a little incomplete. And like the consequences of that are not as bad as you think.
I like that.
So like that's like a pretty important thing is just like be willing to embrace like a little bit of chaos. And like there are definitely situations where you might not want that to happen, but the
Those
consequences
are
are
few
not
and far
are not
between.
so great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um so like that's one thing. And like the other thing I would say is really thinking you're going to arrive at a place where your context is complete.
Mm,
Not only because I don't think we really, as an industry, have a great sense of all of the best practices and nuances of context engineering. Like that's definitely an aspect of it, is that we don't know this. But also your business is going to change and your context needs to change. Like your data warehouse was never going to be done. Your context is just kind of an
yeah, what's it?
extension
Data's
of
never
that.
done. That's the word.
So just expect to iterate. Um, be willing to experiment. That's the most important thing, is just being curious and flexible, I
Got
think.
it. So it sounds like the wrong thing to do is do too much or do nothing. Just meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. Like do what you're able.
Yeah,
Is probably the best way to start.
because this isn't a fad. I,
No,
I
I don't think
I
this is
wouldn't
going
characterize this
anywhere.
as like the big data fad from a decade
I mean,
ago
even that,
or
like there are parts of it that are
that
are still in
are
practice. So
yeah,
I don't know. The everything continues forever, I think,
that is
in
true.
data technology. But
Yeah.
this is definitely a big one. And it's one that you get a lot of leverage from. So it's worth investing in.
Yeah, it's not like buying a 3D TV in
Yes.
2010 or anything.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the pinnacle of television technology. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I learned a ton. Hopefully, the people listening did too, and got a little behind the scenes peek at what it's really like to do this stuff. But if anybody wants to have any follow up questions or anything, let us know. We'd love to answer them on LinkedIn or wherever this video ends up. But for now, hope you have a good rest of the day and thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.